All right, guys, today we're going to be taking a look at a problem on this 1.4 liter Ecotec turbo on a Chevrolet Cruze 2012 with the drive belt tensioner down here. And this drive belt tensioner is broken. Now, don't worry about the oil all over this. This is a different problem this engine has, which I suspect is a failed crankshaft pulley. But if we take a look and zoom in at the top of this assembly and we look at this little piece of metal here, you see there's a little hole in here. Normally there's a pin tool that goes in here to retain this spring when you take the tension off. But in this case, this whole piece here is just moving around very freely. And we can actually see it down here below if we can get the flashlight in a better position for you. You see this guy runs all the way down the center of that spring. If the flashlight will cooperate with us. Might not. There's a lot of shadows down here and it's an overcast day at the moment. But if you look down below on there, you can see this guy moving down there. And he's not supposed to move down there. See right there, he's coming all the way up. He's come loose down below. And so that requires replacement. So what we're going to be doing today is going through how we'll go about replacing this. But first, let me show you what it looks like on another vehicle that's not broken. All right, guys, we're on this Chevrolet Sonic with the same engine. And you can see this little piece of metal is not supposed to move up, right? We can hit it with a screwdriver, and it's got tension against it, and it's fixed in position. So that's how that's supposed to be. All right, guys, so to get better access and do this repair, the first thing we're going to have to take off is the air box. And the way we're going to remove that is there's a wiring harness here. And we're going to take off one of these clamps so that we can disconnect the hose. We're going to take off the drain line, and then it's just held in by a couple of rubber bushings, and it just pops out. We'll see that when we get it off. So to get this guy off, we're just going to give this a pull and a pinch. He comes off, and then if we look on the other side, there's a little clip here that holds the wiring harness, and it just slides in there, right? It just slides in. So it slides in and slides out. So with that, we've got the harness out of the way. And now to get the clamp off, just get yourself a flathead screwdriver. You can get a socket on here with a ratchet too. Doesn't really matter. Just want to take the tension off. Once you've got the tension off, this guy will just come off like that. And then right down here, if we come around the front, I mentioned there's like a drain. This guy right here, you just wiggle him out. It's like a rubber fitting. And then here's one of those rubber bushings. So he's got like a clamp that holds onto a rubber bushing. There's one on this side, and there's one on the other side. Put my screwdriver down for a second. All we need to do to get this off, just kind of rock it back and forth, and it comes off, right? So here's the rubber bushing that's closest to the cowl, the firewall. And then here's the one that we saw that is pointing toward the front of the vehicle. And so now when you get this out of the way, let me just set this aside. When you get this out of the way, you got to take the motor mount off, right? And so you got 3 15 millimeters here, got 2 here, 1 here, and 1 here, and then you got a 15 millimeter nut on the back. Now before you pull these, we've got to get a jack underneath the engine, because once you take this off, the engine's going to fall. So you got to get something to hold the engine in this current position before you can remove the motor mount. The other thing you want to do is get yourself a rag or something and shove into here and here so you don't have any debris, and here so no debris falls in there. So we're going to take care of the getting those guys plugged up, and we're going to get it jacked up. I'll show you the position with the jack. Basically just get a jack and a block of wood to support the engine, and then we'll come back and pull this mount. So guys, in order to get the jack into position, you'll have a panel, plastic panel, covering the engine. And that's held in by some 8 millimeter fasteners and some of these push pin clip type fasteners, right? So you just need to get a tool like this where you can pull the middle out, and that unlocks it. Actually, it's okay if it comes apart. You can put it back together, right? These pieces just kind of snap into each other like that. And then as you push this in, it expands this, and that's what holds it on. So you just need to go around. There's a 8 millimeter like this near the back. They're pretty small. There's one here, there's one here, there's one near the back. There's another push pin here, and there's going to be a couple of push pins on the fender well here. Just take all those off so we can drop this panel. All right, guys, so here we see we have the jack in position with the block of wood after we have the panel removed. You don't need to jack the engine up. You're just going to jack it up, literally with your hand until you make a snug contact with the wood. We're just trying to hold the engine in the current position that it's in right now for when we take the mount off. That's it. So once you're in that kind of position and you're sure that you've got the jack valve tightened so it doesn't drop on you, then let's go ahead and pull that mount. All right, guys, let's go ahead and pull these bolts. Now what we'll do on the middle one is we won't pull it out all the way, just in case there's a problem with our jack. We're going to take it out part way and we'll see what happens. All right, so we can see it's a little bit of a drop. So I'm just going to go back underneath. I'm going to check the jack, make sure it's still in position. Before we continue. All right, so the only reason we did that is so that we don't have as much of a gap to close up when we reinstall it. All right. Next, we're going to have to get out this bracket here. I'm going to switch tools for that. Now we'll go ahead and keep taking this off, and we'll come back when we have it done. All right, guys, we've got this last bolt on this side, just to the point where we can loosen it by hand. Now you'll find out these bolts are a little bit too long on the bottom to actually remove. They're going to hit the body, so you're going to have to leave them in there. Kind of cock this guy out like that. You can get them out with the bolts in there. All right, with this out, and by the way, another way you could take the motor mount off, I took it off in 2 pieces. We could have just left that all in one piece and just removed these 3 and these 3 if you want to. Different ways to skin that cat. All right, so now, as you can tell, you have to take all this off to change the belt. And we're going to have to change the belt with the tensioner in this situation just because of the damage that we're dealing with. So let's go ahead and get that belt loosened off the tensioner. So that should be a star bit. I think it looks like a... Okay, guys, it is an E14. And we're just going to put that on this bit on the top of the pulley. Now remember, since ours is broke, normally we would just give this thing a push and compress it. So not really sure what it's going to do when we take the tension off, but we just want to get this off of here. So there's no tension on it. All right, so yeah, it's just expanding to its full length. All right, so now we're going to need to remove this guy. And there's a couple of bolts, one here and one down here. So let me go get my ratchet. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get this off. There's an E14 on the top bolt. Now you can see what's happening as I take this off. That spring is continuing and continuing to open. So when you have this kind of a problem with this thing broke, definitely probably want to, you definitely want to have eye protection on. You want to be very careful how you're getting this off because this assembly could come apart on us. All right, so now we've got a little bit of the tension off. I'm going to switch to the other bolt and the bottom area. It's going to be harder to see. That's going to be an E12. That's going to be this guy all the way down here. So I can get the light where you can see something. Something here. Hopefully it doesn't grenade on us. Whoops. I haven't gotten it right to the point where the electric ratchet can run it yet. Might just have to switch to our manual. There it goes. You can see that spring is really tensing up on us. All right, good. Did not grenade on us. I wasn't sure how integral the assembly was. You can see the spring broke off. So we're going to hold on to this bolt. And we're going to put this in the scrap metal pile. Get the rest of this guy off. So the other thing you want to do is you want to take note of how your belt went, right? So it went over the top part of the belt, goes over this pulley, and then goes up and under your alternator. All right, so you can see here, it wasn't even running on the full pulley here, right? It was a lot of pressure on this side, kind of cockeyed because of what was going on there. And we can see here's where that piece broke inside. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to replace it with. And we're going to replace this with a GM 251 95388. And your new part is going to come like this. So you can see we already have a new E14 bolt. Whoops, right? So we don't need this one. So this is another thing for the scrap metal pile. We're going to reuse our E12 bolt down here, though. And you can see there's a retaining pin holding this piece together that broke on ours. And what you do is after you get this thing mounted and you get your pulley in position, take the tension off of it and you remove this pin, you save this pin. Because if you're ever doing something like changing the alternator or the air conditioning compressor or something else where you need to take the tension off the belt and put this into a certain position, this is what this pin is for. There's actually a tool the dealers have that replicates what this pin is doing. So let's go ahead and get this guy repositioned. I don't think we have really much cleanup to do. The other thing we do is I can tell just from the oil that I'm seeing underneath here that we definitely have a crankshaft seal that we need to replace. So we'll tackle that in a separate video. Let's go ahead and put this guy in down here. Just going to get him threaded by hand first. And then get our belt out from under there. Kind of got in the way. Well, should have caught that before I put it on, actually. I'm going to loosen it up a little bit to get the belt out from underneath. There we go. All right, now we can get the C12 started. There he is. Keep missing him. Yeah. Now, I got to get in where the camera is, guys, to get this threaded. So let me stop for a second and get inside where I can see what I'm doing. All right, guys, that was a pisser to get that little E12 bolt in back here. Basically, the trick is that this guy has got to be perfectly perpendicular, so you don't want to have the bolt here threaded in until you get that bolt started. But once you get it threaded in, then you're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and snug these up with the electric ratchet. Let's switch to our E14. All right, now we're going to have to torque them. I'll show you what that torque value is. So if we look at the service manual, and we look at installing this new drive belt tensioner, we can see that the small bolt, the little E12, that guy gets torqued to 16 foot-pounds, or 22 newton meters. And the bigger one on top, the E14, gets torqued to 41 foot-pounds, or 55 newton meters. So we're going to torque that guy back up, and then we're going to put a belt on. All right, guys, so let's see how our belt routed, right? So it would have gone over the crankshaft pulley, rib side, and then it would have gone face side over the tensioner, and then it would have gone rib side over our alternator. Then it would have went around down our air conditioning compressor and then back along the bottom of our crankshaft pulley. Just trying to make sure we have it right, so that we can always consult the service manual, but rather than digging through there, we can kind of see how this goes. So now let's look at our new belt. So I'm going to place this with an AC Delco belt, GM original equipment. Right, so that would be a part number 55578811. This is that kind of new packaging GM's using with the holograms on the side to show that it's genuine. And then when you take the guy out, you'll also find that GM and the part number stamped in on the belt itself, just a way to kind of avoid a fake. So all we're going to do is we're going to route this guy around just like we see this one here. So over, over, under, looped, and over. So we're going to take our old one out. And you definitely want to replace the belt in this kind of a situation because like we were saying earlier, we saw it on the pulley. If I still have it down here, yep. We saw on the pulley where there was a lot of wear occurring at a particular angle, right? And you can see that on this shiny surface on this belt where the writing's been all worn off. Eventually what would happen is it would start cutting through the belt. So since the belt's already partially compromised and we already have the motor mount off and we've done the the work to get in here, we might as well just replace it. All right, so we're going to run it over our cam belt here, AC compressor, crankshaft pulley, back underneath our tensioner. Now this thing's probably going to walk off you a few times. I'm going to probably have to block your view for just a second to get it going. Okay, I think we've got it in all the right places we want. Now you're not going to be able to get it to go on the alternator without taking some tension off the pulley, but we just want to make sure that we do have it in these grooves correctly on the balancer. All right, so now we're going to go back and get our E14 and our breaker bar. And then we're going to grab a pair of pliers, long nose pliers. And you want to definitely have your eye protection on here because what we're going to do is pull the pin out. Okay. So we're going to take the tension off, just like we did to begin with. Just if I can do it like this and it doesn't block your view as much. There we go. All right. And we're going to get our long nose pliers ready to pull our pin out. Take the tension off. All right, so we take the tension off, and you see this pin can come in and out. All right, so we take this pin out. I'm just going to sit it right here for now. And then we're going to go ahead and get our belt in position. That's a new belt, so of course it's super, super tight. And well, we're binding somewhere because we didn't have enough slack to get it on all the way. There we go. All right, now we got it. It was just cockeyed on the air conditioning compressor over here. All right, so we're done. We've got our new belt installed. We've got our new tensioner installed. I like to run the part number where you can read it like this. It's a good, easy way when you're trying to diagnose problems. You can see that writing. It can kind of help you with diagnosing things if you got a wobble or some vibration or belt noise or something like that going on. So if you should hold on to the pin, because just like in the service manual, and they show you the tool they use, it's very much like this pin to secure that. You can keep this around, so if you're ever changing the alternator or the air conditioning compressor, like I was saying earlier, you can pop this guy in there to hold that. So at this point, we're done. We're just going to reverse the disassembly that we did. We're going to put our motor mount back on. We're going to take our jack out. We're going to put our shield back on underneath, and then we're going to reinstall our air box. So we'll come back in just a moment. I'll go over some of the torque values for those. All right, guys, as we put this back together, there's a couple of points here, right? So this nut and these two bolts that we use to hold this part of the motor mount in, right? These two bolts went here, and the nut went here. These we can reuse. These three we have to toss. That's because these are torque to yield bolts, and you can only use them one time. I'll show you in the service manual where there's the warning disclaimer about not reusing these bolts. There's a high chance that they can either break or not torque properly, so they're only supposed to be used one time. They are replaced by a 115-705-14. Right, so that is the equivalent bolt that we replace these. So we're going to need to put 3 of these in there and take our other ones and put them in our metal recycling. And unfortunately, that's the same case for these 3 long ones that go into the engine. These are also torque to yield bolts. They have to be discarded and replaced with 3 of 115-88-757, right? And that's these. So these get recycled, scrap metal, and we have these 3. So let me pull up the service manual, and I'll show you the reference to that, and we'll also show the torque values. All right, guys, so we're looking at the Cruze version of the service manual 2012. They're all very similar with the same engine. So we're looking in the 1.4 liter section. Happens to be very similar for the 1.2, but it's the 1.4 engine mount replacement, right side, passenger side. We've already done this, right? You know, normally the dealer would hook a cherry picker up to one of the lift brackets on the engine. Instead of that, we put the jack underneath the oil pan. It's much more convenient for a DIY situation at home. And then we talked about removing these 3 bolts, these 2 bolts, and this 1 nut. You know, just kind of ignore the graphic. The older bolts were separate washers. The newer ones, it's all integrated, but the same thing. So note here, step 4, remove and discard the 3 engine mount to engine mount bracket bolts, part 3. That's these guys over here. So those have to be tossed. The others can be reused. And then as we talk about replacing them and reversing the procedure, they mention here, install the 3 new engine mount to engine mount bracket bolts, part 3, right? So it's very clear that these have to be replaced. Here's the torque values. So the 2 bolts that don't get replaced, those get to be torqued to 46 foot-pounds, just straight up 46 foot-pounds. The 3 torque to yield bolts that we had to replace, those are a little different. Those are 37 foot-pounds, and then you're also going to need a degree angle tool. They're also 36 foot-pounds plus an additional 60 to 70 degrees. And I'll show you a shot of what that is in a little bit when I get this put back together. And while they don't specifically mention the nut here, right? So you notice they show it here, but they don't call it out separately. It has the same torque value as the two bolts in the back. So these three, the nut and the two bolts, are the 46 foot-pounds. And then the three nut washer assemblies are the 37 foot-pounds plus the 60 to 70 degrees of additional torque. Now, in our case, we also removed the engine mount bracket on the right side. So that's this guy here. And again, the 3 bolts, remove and discard the 3 engine mount bracket bolts, right? These are torque to yield one-time use bolts. Over here in the installation procedure, right? And again, they have a whole bunch of things on the warnings on torque to yield fasteners and why you have to discard them. But install the 3 new engine mount bracket bolts, torque them to 45 foot-pounds plus an additional 45 to 60 degrees. All right, so let's get this assembled, and then I'll just show a little bit about what this degree means. All right, guys, one more tip as you put this back together. You know, if we zoom in a little bit here, we can see a corrosion outline of where these two pieces originally went together, right? And that's going to be how it helps you get it back and aligned how it was. It's very good to pay attention to this because getting this lined up where it was can help avoid any kind of vibration issues or any kind of things like that. I mean, it's not a super critical thing, and to a certain degree, the bolts are going to kind of self-align things, but I would take the extra moment to check all of that. Very similarly, even though we're replacing the bolts, we can see the outline of where the washer heads used to be, right? And so that also, to a certain extent, will help you get this lined up. So just kind of pay attention to that sort of thing as you reassemble. All right, guys, just going to show you this, last part here as an example. I'm going to put these at the 37 foot-pounds that the service manual recommended. And remember, these are new bolts, not reusing the old ones. All right, and then the last part, if you remember, it was 37 foot-pounds plus 60 to 70 degrees. So you have to use a tool like this to catch the degrees. And so 60 to 70, what it means is after you torque it, you're going to twist it again with this tool until the needle on this, let me see if I can turn this with my hand to show you, until the needle on this guy moves to, so there's 60, there's 70. When it says stuff like this, I tend to put it either right in the middle or at the minimum that they say. The reason there's a range is sometimes, this is not a super accurate type of tool. You want to get it just in that kind of round area. So let me hook this up, and then we'll do that. All right, guys, we've got our gauge hooked up to our torque wrench. Just using a small adapter for this particular application because we don't have a lot of room. And we already got these guys torqued to 37 foot-pounds. We need to do an additional 60 degrees. I'm going to use this up against this bracket. If you watch the gauge here, we're just going to give it a turn until we get to an extra 60 degrees. And there you can see we've got the 60 degrees. If we come on this other side, here we can see that. Zoom in. And that's all it is to it. So sometimes you'll see a torque value expressed in terms of Newton meters or foot-pounds, but then requesting an additional set of degrees. Like in this case, it was 60 to 70. So anything in that range of 60 to 70 will complete the torque on that fastener. All right, one more. We're just going to land it right on 60 at the minimum. And that's all there is to it. All right, guys, we all wrapped up, right? We showed torquing things up. Final assembly, right? Slide this back in, clip it in, make sure the lock is pushed back in for the electrical connector. Make sure it's seated on the rubber bushings. Make sure this drain stud pipe is reinstalled. Make sure this is lined up. You'll notice there's like an alignment notch here. It goes into the hard notch on the air housing, and then on the actual clamp there's no torque value. Just snug it down, don't over tighten it so you don't damage or distort the plastic. And that is the end of this repair. We've got both the belt and the torsioner replaced, and of course we've got fresh torque to yield bolts that are necessary because of what we had to remove. If you got any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. I'll try to help out. If you've done this repair and you've done something a little different, go ahead and share it. I'd love to hear it. If you found this video useful and it saved you some money, hit that like button, hit that thanks button. And otherwise, thanks for watching.